The gavel struck. Sentenced to death, the judge boomed. Tomorrow, Sergeant Miller would die. The room held its breath. But then, his canine partner, Bruno, lunged forward, barking wildly at the bench. The guards froze. The judge paled. Because in that moment, the dog didn't just make noise. He exposed a lie that would bring the entire court to its knees. Before we continue, if you're moved by stories of loyalty and justice, hit that like button. It truly helps more people find this video. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales that restore your faith in humanity. I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel across the world. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Sergeant James Miller was once a name spoken with reverence on every military base from Baghdad to Berlin. Decorated twice for valor, he carried the weight of command with quiet dignity. Beside him, always, was Bruno, a German shepherd, with eyes that saw through smoke, lies, and fear. They'd survived an IED blast together in Kandahar. Bruno had dragged Miller from the wreckage while under fire, but now, in a civilian courtroom draped in cold marble and colder judgment, Miller sat in a wheelchair, accused of the one crime no soldier could survive, murdering his own lieutenant during a classified op gone wrong. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning a weapon registered to him, a witness placing him at the scene, and a motive whispered in hushed tones: betrayal over a failed mission. Reporters scribbled furiously. Veterans watched with broken hearts. Miller said nothing. His silence wasn't guilt, it was resignation. He knew the truth wouldn't fit into neat legal boxes. All he held on to was Bruno's leash, his knuckles white, his only tether to a world that had already condemned him. The air smelled of floor wax and old paper, a sterile scent that masked the rot of injustice. Miller's uniform was still pressed, his medals still gleaming, but the honor behind them had been stripped away by whispers and politics. He looked at the jury, seeing not faces, but masks of indifference. They didn't know the sand in his boots or the blood on his hands from saving lives. They only saw the charge sheet. Bruno sensed his pain, even when the soldier said nothing, resting his heavy head on Miller's knee, a silent promise that he was not alone in this fortress of lies. That night, the prison cell felt less like steel and more like a tomb. A single bulb flickered above, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts of better days. Outside, crickets sang. Inside, silence pressed down like stone. Miller stared at the ceiling, counting seconds until dawn would come with a needle and an end. Bruno lay beside the bars, ears perked, body tense. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't slept. Every few minutes, he'd rise, circle, then stop sniffing the air near the guard's desk where a manila folder labeled Evidence, State vs. Miller sat untouched. The guard had stepped out for a moment, leaving the door ajar, a mistake that would change history. Suddenly, Bruno growled low, a sound Miller had only heard once before in the desert, seconds before an ambush. He pawed at the folder until it slid off the edge, spilling photos and documents across the concrete floor. Among them, a torn sleeve patch with foreign stitching, a shell casing not from Miller's rifle, and a faded radio log showing the lieutenant's last transmission calling for backup from a location miles from where Miller was stationed. Miller's breath caught. His hands trembled as he gathered the papers. "You remember, don't you, boy?" he whispered. Bruno whined softly, pressing his muzzle into Miller's palm. In that moment, hope, fragile but fierce, flickered back to life. It wasn't just evidence. It was a memory captured in scent and paper. Bruno had smelled the traitor on these pages. The dog knew what the lawyers missed. Miller folded the papers, hiding them in his wheelchair cushion. He wouldn't sleep tonight. He would wait for the sun. Morning came with a metallic chill. The courtroom buzzed with finality. Spectators filled every seat, cameras poised like predators. Miller wheeled in, pale but composed. Bruno at his side, wearing his old service vest. The words "military working dog" still bold against faded fabric. The judge adjusted his glasses, voice heavy with duty. All appeals denied. Execution scheduled for 6 a.m. tomorrow. A collective sigh swept through the room. Miller closed his eyes. Then Bruno erupted, not with aggression, but with urgent, desperate barks aimed squarely at a man in the third row, Captain Vance, the prosecution's star witness and the lieutenant's former aide. "Control that animal," Vance shouted, face flushed. But Bruno strained against his leash, hackles raised, eyes locked on Vance's trembling hands. Chaos broke loose. Reporters stood. Bailiffs rushed forward, when suddenly a small object clattered from Vance's coat pocket. It rolled to a stop at the judge's feet. A dog tag, identical to Miller's, but engraved with Vance's ID number, and traces of the same rare gun oil found on the murder weapon. The room fell dead silent. Vance's face drained of color. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The judge leaned forward. "Explain this," he demanded. Vance collapsed into sobs. "I panicked. The mission was compromised. I shot him to cover my tracks. Miller tried to save him. I framed him because he knew too much." Gasps turned to shouts. The truth, buried for months, tore through the courtroom like lightning. The bailiffs seized Vance, dragging him away as he screamed confessions that echoed off the high ceilings. Bruno stopped barking. He sat calmly, watching the man who had tried to steal his handler's life be led away in chains. The dog's job was done. In the stunned aftermath, no one moved for a full minute. Then, slowly, the bailiff unlocked Miller's cuffs. Tears streamed down the sergeant's face as he wrapped his arms around Bruno, burying his face in the dog's thick fur. "You never forgot," he choked out. "You were there." The judge rose from the bench, his usual stern composure shattered. He walked past the jury, past the prosecutors, and stopped before Bruno. Then, to the shock of everyone present, he sank to one knee, placing a reverent hand on the dog's head. "Forgive us," he whispered, voice breaking. "We listened to testimony, to paperwork, to politics, but you listened to truth." Cameras flashed, capturing a moment that would echo for generations. Weeks later, Miller's rank was restored, his medals polished anew. Bruno received the first ever Canine Medal of Valor pinned personally by the Secretary of Defense. At the ceremony, a reporter asked how a dog could unravel a conspiracy. Miller smiled gently. "He doesn't hear lies," he said. "He hears hearts." As they left the courthouse that day, sunlight warming their faces, Bruno walked tall beside his hero, not as a pet, but as the truest witness justice ever had. For in a world of shifting words and hidden agendas, sometimes the loudest truth is spoken without a single word at all. The story became a symbol of faith and loyalty across the globe. Schools, police stations, and even courtrooms began teaching it, calling it the day justice barked. As the sun set behind the American flag, Miller rolled forward, Bruno walking proudly beside him. "He didn't just save my life," Miller whispered to the crowd. "He reminded the world that loyalty speaks louder than any human voice ever could." And in that silence, everyone finally understood.